What happens when the man you thought you controlled serves you with a stack of legal papers, cold, final, and without a single word? How could one weekend, meant to fix everything, become the proof that you lost it all? The last thing I expected was for my husband to fight back with silence and evidence, not anger. The candles flickered across Graham's face as I cleared my throat at Trattoria Glasso. Our friends and family had gathered for his 35th birthday, the warm Italian restaurant buzzing with conversation and clinking glasses. I felt the weight of what I was about to say, but I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. Honesty was always the best policy, wasn't it? I have something I need to share with everyone, I announced, my voice cutting through the chatter. The table fell silent. Graham's mother Ruth looked up from her tiramisu, her silver eyebrows raised. His father Martin set down his wineglass. Our 7-year-old daughter Eleanor was colouring at the kids' table nearby, thankfully distracted. Graham's eyes met mine across the table. Those deep brown eyes that used to look at me with such warmth now seemed guarded, distant. I'd been trying to reconnect with him for months, but he'd been so withdrawn, so focused on his work projects that he barely noticed me anymore. Graham and I have been going through a rough patch, I continued, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for my water glass. And I want everyone to know that I made a mistake. I got close to someone at work. Too close. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Liza Merrin, whose husband Silas worked with me at the insurance office, nearly choked on her wine. My sister Jenna's mouth fell open. Ruth's face had gone completely white. Vesperine, Graham said quietly, his voice steady but strained. This isn't the place. No, I need to say this, I pressed on, feeling a strange rush of adrenaline. I need everyone to understand what happened. Silas. I glanced at Liza, who was staring at me with growing horror. Silas pursued me for months. He kept saying how Graham was always working, how I deserved better attention. I resisted for so long, but eventually... Stop, Liza whispered, her face pale. Just stop talking. But I couldn't stop. The words poured out of me like water through a broken dam. I kissed him. Once. That's all it was. And immediately I knew it was wrong. I told him we could never do anything like that again. I chose my family. I chose Graham. Graham sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at his untouched birthday cake, a chocolate creation with 35 candles that had long since been blown out. The point is, I continued, my voice gaining strength, I'm being completely honest now. No secrets. That's what real love is. Being able to tell the truth, even when it hurts, even when it's hard. Ruth finally found her voice. You chose to humiliate my son at his birthday dinner, in front of his child, in front of all of us. Her voice was ice cold, each word carefully enunciated. You call that love? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I call it honesty, I shot back, feeling defensive. How many wives would have the courage to admit their mistakes, to choose their marriage over an affair? An affair? Jenna echoed, looking confused. I thought you said it was just a kiss. It was just a kiss, I insisted. That's what I'm saying. It could have been so much worse, but I stopped it. I chose Graham. Liza stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. She grabbed her purse and coat, not looking at anyone. Happy birthday, Graham. I'm sorry this happened. She left without another word. The remaining guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eleanor looked up from her colouring book, sensing the tension. Daddy, is everything okay? Graham's composure finally cracked slightly. He glanced at our daughter and managed a small smile. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Keep colouring. Martin cleared his throat. Perhaps we should call it tonight. Graham, thank you for dinner. It was memorable. One by one, our friends and family members made their excuses and left. Jenna squeezed my hand before she went. "Call me tomorrow," she whispered. "We need to talk." Soon it was just Graham, Eleanor, and me sitting at the table surrounded by half-eaten desserts and cold coffee. The waiter had already brought the check, which Graham paid without saying a word. "Graham," I said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "I know this was hard to hear, but don't you see? This proves how much I love you. I could have hidden it forever, but I chose to be honest. I chose us." He pulled his hand away gently and stood up. "Eleanor, get your coat. We're going home." As we walked to the car, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. I'd done it. I'd told the truth. Now we could move forward, rebuild our marriage on a foundation of honesty. Graham would understand eventually. He had to. But as I watched him buckle Eleanor into her car seat, his movements careful and methodical, I noticed something in his expression that I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or hurt, or even disappointment. It was calculation. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Graham was already gone, probably for his morning run, though he usually waited until after breakfast on Sundays. Eleanor was still sleeping, her small form curled up in her princess-themed bedroom down the hall. I padded to the kitchen in my robe, expecting to find Graham making his usual weekend pancakes. Instead, I found a note on the counter. "Took Eleanor to Mom's for the day. Back this evening. G." My stomach clenched. He'd taken our daughter to Ruth's house without telling me. After last night, I knew exactly what that meant. Ruth would be filling Eleanor's head with poison about me, turning my own child against me. I called his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Graham, it's me. I don't appreciate you taking Eleanor without discussing it first. We need to talk about what happened last night. I know you're processing everything, but running away isn't the solution. Call me back." The house felt eerily quiet without them. I wandered through the rooms, noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. Graham's coffee mug wasn't in the sink where he usually left it. His jacket wasn't hanging on the hook by the door. Small things, but they felt significant somehow. I decided to clean the house while I waited for them to return. Keeping busy would help me think through how to handle the situation. Graham was hurt, obviously, but once he had time to process what I'd told him, he'd realize that my honesty was actually a gift. Most wives would have hidden an affair, even a minor one, forever. I was brave enough to tell the truth. While cleaning his study, I noticed his laptop was password protected now. That was new. Graham had never been secretive about his computer before. I tried his usual passwords: Eleanor's birthday, our anniversary, his mother's maiden name, but none of them worked. There were new folders on his desk too, manila folders I'd never seen before. When I tried to open one, I found it was locked with a small combination lock. Who locks folders in their own home? My phone rang, startling me. It was Jenna. "Vesperine, what the hell were you thinking last night?" she said without preamble. "I was thinking about saving my marriage," I replied, sinking into Graham's desk chair. I was being honest. "You humiliated him, in front of everyone, on his birthday." Jenna's voice was sharp with disbelief. "And what about Liza? Did you see her face? You basically announced that her husband has been trying to seduce you." "That's not my fault," I protested. "I can't control how other people react to the truth. And Silas was pursuing me. I didn't make that up." "But was it really just a kiss, Vesperine?" "Really?" The question hung in the air. I felt a flash of irritation. "Of course it was just a kiss. Why would I lie about that?" "Because you've been acting strange for months, staying late at work, being secretive about your phone, buying new clothes. I thought maybe you were planning a surprise for Graham, but now what? Now I'm wondering if there's more to this story than you're telling." I ended the call, frustrated. Even my own sister was turning against me. Didn't anyone understand what I was trying to do? I was trying to save my marriage by being honest about my mistakes. That took courage. Graham and Eleanor returned that evening, just as I was finishing dinner. Eleanor ran to hug me, chattering about her day with Grandma Ruth. Graham was polite but distant, thanking me for dinner and helping Eleanor with her bath without really looking at me. After Eleanor was tucked into bed, I found Graham in his study, working on his laptop. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. "Do we?" he replied, not looking up from his screen. "Yes, we do. About last night. About what I told everyone." "You mean about your affair with Silas?" "It wasn't an affair," I said quickly. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness, and I ended it before it could become anything more." Graham finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable. "When? When what? When did this moment of weakness happen?" I hesitated. The truth was more complicated than what I'd shared last night. It hadn't been just one kiss. There had been several encounters over the past few months, lunches that ran long, late nights at the office, text messages that crossed the line. But it had never become physical beyond kissing. That was the important thing. "Does it matter exactly when?" I asked. "What matters is that I ended it. I chose you." "It matters to me." 3 months ago, I said finally. "It was after that fight we had about your work schedule. You'd been putting in so many late nights, and I felt neglected. Silas was there, he listened to me, and I made a mistake." Graham nodded slowly, as if filing away this information. 3 months ago. Yes, and I've regretted it every day since." "Have you?" Something in his tone made me uncomfortable. "Of course I have. Graham, I love you. I love our family. That's why I told the truth last night. I want us to work through this together." "By humiliating me in front of our friends and family." "By being honest," I snapped, my patience finally wearing thin. "Do you know how many women would never admit to something like this? I could have kept it secret forever, but I chose to tell you the truth. I chose transparency." "You chose to make a public spectacle of our private business," Graham said quietly. "You chose to embarrass me on my birthday. You chose to hurt our daughter by creating a scene in front of her." Eleanor didn't understand what was happening. "Eleanor understands more than you think." We stared at each other across his desk. The locked folders seemed to loom between us, a physical reminder of the distance that had grown in our marriage. "What are those?" I asked, nodding toward the folders. "Work documents." "Since when do you lock up work documents at home?" "Since I started working on more sensitive projects." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it felt off. Graham had been an IT project manager for the same company for 8 years. He'd never brought home anything that required this level of security before. "Graham, I know you're angry with me, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "I'm not angry, Vesperine." "You're not?" "No, I'm disappointed and I'm tired." "Tired of what?" "Tired of feeling like I'm married to someone I don't recognize anymore." His words hit me like a slap. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been watching you change for months. Staying late at work, being secretive, picking fights with me over nothing. I thought maybe you were unhappy, maybe we needed to work on our communication. But now I understand what was really happening. What was really happening was that I made a mistake and I'm trying to fix it. By announcing it to everyone we know. By being honest." Graham closed his laptop and stood up. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk more tomorrow." As he moved toward the door, I grabbed his arm. "Graham, please. I know last night was awkward, but we can get past this. We can be stronger than before." He looked down at my hand on his arm, then back at my face. "Can we?" "Yes, if you'll let us." He gently removed my hand. "Good night, Vesperine." After he left, I sat in his study for a long time, staring at those locked folders. Something was happening here, something I didn't understand. Graham wasn't reacting the way I'd expected. Where was the anger? Where were the accusations and demands for details? Instead, he seemed to be planning something. But what? Monday morning at the insurance office felt like walking into a minefield. I could sense the whispers before I even reached my desk. News of my confession had clearly spread beyond our dinner table. Silas was already at his cubicle when I arrived, but he didn't look up when I passed. Usually he'd flash me that charming smile and make some comment about my outfit or ask about my weekend. Today, nothing. "Silas," I said quietly, stopping by his desk, "we need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea," he replied, still focused on his computer screen. "About what happened Saturday night." "Nothing happened Saturday night that concerns me." His voice was cold, professional. "I wasn't even there." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you seriously going to pretend you don't know what I'm talking about?" Finally, he looked at me. His blue eyes, which had seemed so warm and understanding during our long lunch conversations, were now distant and calculating. "Vesperine, I think you might be confused about something. We're colleagues. We've had some friendly conversations. But that's all. If you've gotten the wrong impression—" "The wrong impression," I hissed, keeping my voice low. "You kissed me, multiple times. You told me you were falling for me. You said Graham didn't appreciate me." "I think you're mistaken." He turned back to his computer. "I'd appreciate it if you'd keep our interactions professional from now on." I felt like I'd been slapped. This was the man who'd spent months pursuing me, telling me how beautiful I was, how much he understood me. Now he was acting like I'd imagined the whole thing. "Vesperine," my manager Carol appeared at my elbow. "Can I see you in my office for a moment?" The walk to Carol's office felt like a death march. I could feel every eye in the office following me. Carol closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "I've received some concerns about workplace relationships," she began carefully. "I want to make sure we're all on the same page about professional boundaries." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that suggests there might have been some inappropriate interactions between you and a married colleague." My face burned. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter who said it. What matters is that we maintain a professional environment here. I need to know if there's anything I should be aware of." I thought about Silas's denial, about the way he'd looked at me like I was a stranger, about how he was probably telling everyone that I'd been the one pursuing him, that I'd misinterpreted his friendliness. "There's nothing to be aware of," I said finally. "Someone has the wrong idea about a few friendly conversations." Carol studied my face. "Okay, but I want to be clear. Any romantic or sexual relationships between employees need to be disclosed to HR, and any harassment from either direction needs to be reported immediately." "I understand." "Good. And Vesperine? Maybe it would be best if you and Silas worked on different projects for a while, just to avoid any appearance of impropriety." The rest of the day was torture. Every conversation stopped when I walked by. Every glance felt loaded with judgment. By lunchtime, I was ready to scream. I called Jenna from my car. "How bad is it?" she asked without preamble. "Everyone's acting like I'm some kind of predator," I said, fighting back tears. "And Silas is pretending nothing ever happened between us. He's making me look like I imagined the whole thing." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you announced it to the world." "Whose side are you on here?" "I'm on the side of not destroying your life over a stupid mistake," Jenna snapped. "What did you think would happen, Vesperine? Did you think everyone would applaud you for your honesty?" "I thought people would understand that I was trying to do the right thing." "The right thing would have been to end it quietly and work on your marriage without involving everyone else. But then I would have been living a lie. Sometimes lies are kinder than the truth." That evening, I came home to find Ruth's car in my driveway. Through the window, I could see her in the kitchen with Graham and Eleanor. They all looked up when I walked in, and the conversation stopped abruptly. "Ruth," I said, forcing a smile. "What a nice surprise." "Hello, Vesperine." Ruth's voice could have frozen water. "I was just helping Graham with dinner." Eleanor ran to hug me, and I held her tight, grateful for her unconditional love. At least my daughter still saw me as her mother, not as the villain in some family drama. "How was school today, sweetheart?" I asked. "Good. Grandma Ruth is making her famous pot roast. I looked at Graham. I thought we agreed I'd cook on weeknights. Mum offered to help, he said simply. I thought it would be nice. Ruth was moving around my kitchen like she owned it, pulling dishes from cabinets and checking the oven. She'd never been particularly warm toward me, but now her disapproval was practically radiating from her pores. Ruth, I appreciate you helping, but I can handle dinner for my own family. Can you? She asked, not looking at me, because it seems like you've been having trouble handling a lot of things lately. Mom, Graham said quietly, but she held up a hand. No, Graham, someone needs to say this. She turned to face me fully. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but my son deserves better than this humiliation. I'm not playing any games, I said, my temper flaring. I made a mistake and I'm trying to fix it. By announcing it to everyone, by embarrassing him in front of his friends, by being honest. There's a difference between honesty and cruelty, dear. What you did Saturday night was cruel. Eleanor was looking back and forth between us, her eyes wide with confusion. I forced myself to lower my voice. Ruth, I understand you're upset, but this is between Graham and me. Is it? Because it seems like you made it everyone's business when you decided to make your announcement at a public dinner. Graham stepped between us. Mum, why don't you take Eleanor to wash up for dinner? Vesperine and I need to talk. After they left, Graham and I stood in the kitchen staring at each other. The pot roast smelled delicious, filling the air with the warm sense of home and family. But the atmosphere between us was arctic. Your mother has no right to speak to me that way in my own house, I said. She's worried about me. About Eleanor. What's that supposed to mean? It means that what you did Saturday night has consequences. People are talking. People are taking sides. What people? Martin called today. He wants to know if I need anything. Jenna called too. She's worried about you, but she's also concerned about how this affects Eleanor. Eleanor is fine. Is she? Because she asked me this morning why Grandma Liza left dinner so upset. She wanted to know if Uncle Silas was in trouble. My stomach dropped. What did you tell her? I told her that adults sometimes have disagreements, and it's nothing for her to worry about. Good, because it isn't anything for her to worry about. Graham was quiet for a long moment, just looking at me with that same unreadable expression he'd worn all weekend. Vesperine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I've been telling you the truth. All of it. What do you mean? I mean, was it really just kissing? Was it really just 3 months? Was it really as innocent as you're making it sound? The questions hung in the air between us. I thought about all the text messages, the long lunches, the late nights at the office. I thought about the way Silas had made me feel, desired, appreciated, understood. I thought about how far things had actually gone. Yes, I said finally. It was just kissing, just a few times, and I ended it because I love you. Graham nodded slowly, but something in his eyes suggested he didn't believe me. Okay, he said. Let's have dinner. But as we sat around the table with Ruth and Eleanor, making small talk about school and work, I couldn't shake the feeling that Graham was studying me. Like he was gathering information, building a case, and those locked folders in his study suddenly felt a lot more ominous. 2 weeks passed in a strange, cold peace. Graham was polite but distant. He came home on time, helped with Eleanor's homework, made small talk about our days. But he might as well have been a boarder for all the emotional connection we had. I tried everything I could think of to bridge the gap between us. I cooked his favorite meals, suggested we watch movies together, even bought lingerie I thought he might like. Nothing worked. He was present but absent, going through the motions of marriage without any of the feeling. The worst part was that I couldn't figure out what he was thinking. Graham had always been the type to talk through problems, to analyze and discuss until we reached a solution. This silent treatment was completely unlike him. At work, things had settled into an uncomfortable routine. Silas continued to act like we barely knew each other. Our colleagues had moved on to other gossip. Carol had reassigned me to different projects, so I rarely had to interact with him directly. But I knew people were still watching me, still whispering. I'd catch fragments of conversations that stopped when I walked by. Poor Graham. Can you imagine? I always thought she was... It was a Thursday evening when I noticed Graham's behavior had shifted again. He was in his study with the door closed, talking quietly on the phone. When I knocked and entered, he quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked. "Work," he said, but something in his tone suggested otherwise. "This late?" "We're dealing with a system upgrade. It's been requiring some evening coordination." I nodded, but I'd been married to Graham long enough to know when he was being evasive. He'd never been a good liar. "Graham, I've been thinking, maybe we should go to counselling, together, to work through what happened." "Maybe," he said non-committally, organising papers on his desk. "I could make some calls tomorrow, find someone who specialises in marriage counselling. If you want to." His lack of enthusiasm was frustrating, but at least he wasn't saying no. I moved closer to his desk, trying to see what he was working on. The papers looked legal, lots of dense text and official formatting. "What's all this?" I asked. "Just some documents I need to review for work," he said, casually sliding the papers into one of his locked folders. "Since when does IT work involve legal documents?" "Since we started dealing with compliance issues for the new client contracts." Again, it was a reasonable explanation, but something felt off. Graham was being too careful, too secretive, and those phone calls were happening more frequently. That weekend, Ruth called to invite Eleanor for a sleepover. It was the perfect opportunity for Graham and me to have some alone time, to really talk without interruption. "That sounds wonderful," I told Ruth over the phone. "Graham and I could use some time to reconnect." There was a pause. "Actually, Vesperine, I was hoping to speak with Graham about it directly." "He's right here," I said, confused. "Graham, your mother wants to talk to you." I handed him the phone and listened to his side of the conversation. It was brief and formal, and when he hung up, he seemed troubled. "What did she say?" I asked. "She wants Eleanor to spend the night Saturday, maybe Sunday too." "That's great. We can have a romantic weekend, maybe drive up to that bed and breakfast in the mountains." Graham was quiet for a long moment. "Actually, I have some things I need to take care of this weekend." "What things?" "Just some errands, some appointments." "What kind of appointments?" "Personal stuff, Vesperine." "Nothing that concerns you." The phrase stung. Nothing that concerns you. When had my husband's personal business stopped concerning me? Saturday morning, Graham dropped Eleanor off at his parents' house. When he came back, he was dressed nicely, khakis and a button-down shirt, like he was going somewhere important. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Downtown. I'll be back this afternoon." "Can I come with you?" "It's better if I go alone." "Graham, what's going on? You've been acting strange for weeks. The secret phone calls, the locked folders, now mysterious appointments downtown. Are you having an affair?" The question popped out before I could stop myself. Graham stared at me for a moment, then actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Am I having an affair? That's rich, coming from you." "I told you about my mistake. I was honest with you." "Were you?" "Yes. How many times do I have to say it?" "Until it's actually true, I guess." He left without another word, and I spent the day pacing around the house, trying to figure out what was happening to my marriage. I considered following him downtown, but I didn't even know where he was going. When he returned that evening, he had a manila envelope with him. He took it straight to his study and locked it in one of his folders. "How did your errands go?" I asked over dinner. "Fine." "What did you do?" "Took care of some business." "What kind of business?" "The kind that needed taking care of." I wanted to scream. This wasn't the man I'd married. Graham had always been open with me, always willing to share what was on his mind. Now he was like a stranger living in my house. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me. He was asleep, but it wasn't the deep, peaceful sleep of someone at rest. It was the sleep of someone who was mentally and emotionally exhausted. I thought about getting up and trying to find the keys to his locked folders. Whatever was in there might give me some clue about what he was planning, but something held me back. Maybe the last shred of respect for his privacy, or maybe just fear of what I might find. Sunday morning brought another surprise. Graham was up early, making breakfast and humming quietly to himself. He seemed almost cheerful, which was the first positive emotion I'd seen from him in weeks. "You're in a good mood," I observed. "It's a beautiful day," he said, flipping pancakes. "I thought maybe we could do something nice together." "Really?" I felt a surge of hope. "What did you have in mind?" "There's a new art exhibit at the museum downtown. I thought you might enjoy it." It was such a normal, couple-like suggestion that I almost cried with relief. "I'd love that." We spent the afternoon at the museum, looking at paintings and sculptures, making the kind of easy conversation we used to have before everything got complicated. Graham was attentive and engaged, asking my opinions about the artwork and sharing his own observations. For a few hours, I allowed myself to believe that we were going to be okay, that whatever crisis we'd been going through was finally ending. But as we drove home, I noticed Graham checking his watch frequently, and when we pulled into our driveway, there was a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked. Graham looked at the car and nodded. "Actually, yes. There's something we need to discuss. We, you and me, and them." A man in a suit got out of the car and walked toward us. He was carrying a briefcase and had the serious professional demeanor of someone in law enforcement or legal services. "Mrs. Holt," he said as we got out of our car, "I have some documents for you." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of documents?" Graham was standing beside me, his expression calm but watchful. "It's okay, Vesperine. Just listen to what he has to say." The man opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "You're being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage, along with temporary orders regarding custody and financial arrangements." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the papers in his hands, unable to process what was happening. "Graham," I whispered. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way," he said quietly, "but I think it's for the best." "You're divorcing me. Over a kiss? Over one stupid mistake?" "It wasn't one mistake, Vesperine, and it wasn't just a kiss." The man handed me the papers. "You have 30 days to respond. All the details are in there." As he walked back to his car, I stood in my driveway holding the papers that would end my marriage. Graham was watching me with that same calm expression, like this was just another item to check off his weekend to-do list. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Since the night you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know." "But we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Read the papers, Vesperine. All of it. Every page." He walked into the house, leaving me standing alone in the driveway. With shaking hands, I opened the folder and began to read. The first page was standard legal language about irreconcilable differences, but as I continued reading, my heart sank further and further. Graham wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was asking for primary custody of Eleanor. He documented a pattern of emotional instability and poor judgment. He'd included witness statements from the birthday dinner. He'd attached financial records showing irregular spending patterns, and at the very back of the folder, there was a handwritten note in Graham's careful script. "You once told me that truth fixes everything, so I'm giving you yours." I spent that entire Sunday night reading and rereading the divorce papers. Every page felt like a fresh betrayal. Graham had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. While I thought we were working through our problems, he'd been building a case against me. The custody section was the worst part. He'd documented every time I'd been late picking up Eleanor from school, every time I'd snapped at her when I was stressed, Every time I'd left her with a babysitter to work late. Things that seemed minor at the time now looked like a pattern of neglect. He'd also included character references from his parents, from Eleanor's teacher, even from my own sister Jenna. That last one hurt the most. When had Jenna given him a statement? What had she said about me? Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't face the office, couldn't pretend everything was normal when my entire life was falling apart. Instead, I drove to Jenna's house. She answered the door in her robe, coffee mug in hand. "Vesperine, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at work?" "Did you know?" I asked without preamble. "Did you know Graham was planning to divorce me?" Jenna's face fell. "Come inside." We sat in her kitchen while she made me coffee with shaking hands. "He called me last week," she said finally. "He asked if I'd be willing to provide a character reference for the custody hearing." "And you said yes?" "I said I'd tell the truth, that you're a good mother who's been going through a difficult time." "What else did you tell him?" Jenna was quiet for a long moment. "He asked me about your behavior over the past few months, whether I'd noticed any changes. And I told him that you'd seemed distracted and secretive, that you'd been working late more often, that you'd seemed different." I felt like she'd stabbed me in the back. "You're my sister." "Which is exactly why I can't lie for you. Eleanor is my niece. If Graham thinks you're not capable of providing a stable home for her—" "Not capable?" I stood up so quickly I knocked over my coffee mug. "I'm her mother." "Being her mother doesn't automatically make you the best choice for primary custody." "I can't believe you're taking his side." "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to do what's best for Eleanor." I left Jenna's house feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My husband was divorcing me, my sister was supporting him, and I was about to lose custody of my daughter. All because I'd been honest about a mistake. When I got home, Graham was in the kitchen making lunch. He looked up when I walked in, his expression carefully neutral. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "How do you think I'm feeling? You're trying to take my daughter away from me." "I'm trying to provide stability for Eleanor during a difficult transition." "By painting me as an unfit mother?" "By documenting the truth about what's been happening in this house." I wanted to argue with him, but the truth was that I couldn't deny most of what was in those papers. I had been working late more often. I had been distracted and short-tempered. I had been prioritizing my relationship with Silas over my responsibilities at home. "Graham, please. We can fix this. I'll quit my job. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage." "It's too late for that." "Why? Because of one mistake?" "Because of 6 months of lies." 6 months? Graham pulled a folder from the counter, one of his locked folders, now open. "Because I know it wasn't just kissing. I know it wasn't just 3 months. And I know it wasn't as innocent as you claim." He spread papers across the kitchen table. Phone records showing hundreds of texts between Silas and me. Credit card statements showing lunches and dinners I'd claimed were work meetings. Hotel receipts I'd forgotten about. "How did you get these?" I whispered. "I've been documenting everything since I first suspected something was wrong. Every lie, every inconsistency, every time your story changed." I stared at the evidence of my affair spread across our kitchen table. It looked so much worse in black and white, so much more deliberate and calculated than it had felt at the time. "Graham, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you told me it was just kissing when you were actually sleeping with him? Can you explain why you said it lasted 3 months, when these records go back 6 months? Can you explain why you decided to humiliate me in public instead of just telling me the truth?" I couldn't explain any of it. The truth was that I'd been living in a fantasy world where I could have both my marriage and my affair, where I could control the narrative and minimize the damage. The truth was that I'd been selfish and reckless and stupid. "I was scared," I said finally. "I was scared of losing you." "So you lied to me for 6 months. You made me feel like I was going crazy, like I was imagining things. You let me blame myself for the distance in our marriage. I never meant for it to go that far. But it did go that far. and now we're here. That afternoon, Eleanor came home from school to find me crying at the kitchen table. She dropped her backpack and ran to me, her small arms wrapping around my waist. "Mummy, what's wrong?" I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. How could I explain to a 7-year-old that her family was falling apart because of my choices? "Mommy and Daddy are having some problems," I said carefully, "but it's not your fault, and we both love you very much." "Are you getting divorced like Emma's parents?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. We're talking about what would be best for our family." Eleanor pulled back to look at me. "Will I have to choose who to live with?" "No, sweetheart. No matter what happens, you'll always have both of us." But even as I said it, I knew it might not be true. If Graham got primary custody, I might only see Eleanor on weekends. I might become the part-time parent, the one who got holidays and summers if I was lucky. That night, I tried one last time to reach Graham. I found him in his study, packing his remaining papers into boxes. "Are you moving out?" I asked. "Tomorrow. I'm staying at my parents' house until I can find an apartment." "Graham, please, don't do this. We can work through this together." He stopped packing and looked at me. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the man I'd married, the man who used to look at me with love and trust. "Vesperine, do you know what the worst part of all this is?" "What?" "It's not the affair. It's not even the lies. It's that you still don't understand what you did wrong." "I do understand. I made a terrible mistake." "No, your mistake was the affair. Your crime was the humiliation. Making our private business public, forcing our friends and family to choose sides, traumatizing our daughter with a scene at a restaurant. That wasn't honesty. That was cruelty. I was trying to save our marriage. You were trying to control the narrative. You were trying to make yourself look like the victim who bravely chose her family over temptation. But that's not what happened, is it?" I couldn't answer him because he was right. I had been trying to control how people saw me, trying to minimize my role and maximize my sacrifice. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry for all of it." "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back 6 months of my life. Sorry doesn't undo the damage to our daughter." He closed the last box and looked around the study that had been his sanctuary. "The papers give you 30 days to respond. I'd recommend getting a lawyer." "Graham." "Good night, Vesperine." After he left, I sat in his empty study and cried until I had no tears left. Everything I'd tried to save, I'd destroyed. Everything I'd tried to protect, I'd lost. And the worst part was that I'd done it all to myself. Over 6 brutal weeks, the case tightened around me. My lawyer warned Graham's evidence was organized. My lies wrecked my credibility, and the court would care more about stability than biology. Work collapsed too. Rumors spread. HR called it a hostile environment, and I was put on paid leave, which only made me look less stable for custody. Eleanor grew anxious, and every handoff to Graham felt like losing her twice. At the November hearing, Graham's side moved like a machine. Timeline, witnesses, the birthday confession, my pattern of deception, until cross-examination forced the truth out. I chased Silas even when he pulled away, and I confessed out of fear, not honesty. The judge ruled fast. Graham got primary custody. I got every other weekend and alternating holidays. The house would be sold, and I'd receive limited support to restart. Outside the courthouse, Graham shut the door for good, saying nothing could undo my choices. That night, I stared at old photos and finally admitted my brave public confession was really control and cruelty. The next morning, the decree arrived again, final, official, along with Graham's note. The truth set us free. And sitting in the wreckage, I realized the only thing I had left was the one thing I'd avoided for months, facing what I'd done without lying about it.